Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Dan with Warpaint JKU, and this is Project Maple Leaf. I got this 14 bolt axle sitting in front of me, and one of the things that makes it so desirable is its size, but it's also the same thing that people complain about, right? Is that hang down below that axle. So you guys want to know how to shave this axle at home in your garage. You want to know directly what the benefits are, exactly how difficult it is, and how to do it with basic tools. You're going to want to check this out. Hey guys, so before we actually get to shaving this axle, because it's not going to take all that long, I want to take a quick moment to ask you guys to make sure to subscribe to this channel, right? Follow me over on the Instagram page. I interact with people over there, but definitely subscribe here. It's free, it doesn't cost you anything, and it helps support me so that I get a couple cents off this video and I can wind up doing more of this stuff in the future and showing you guys some really fun builds. But anyway, before we get to shaving the axle, I need to cut off all these brackets. Now, if you know how to do that, it's pretty simple. If you don't know how to do that, watch my video from this series about how to clean off the Dana 60, and it will teach you everything you need to know. These brackets are pretty simple because they're just regular steel. It's not cast. Cut into those welds, knock it off with a hammer. We'll get to shaving that axle. All right, so obviously these tubes look a little different than they did a few seconds ago. I put in about an hour's worth of work. I cut everything off, welded in the imperfections that were left in the tubes from the grinder, ground those welds smooth, and cleaned up the tubes. And now it's time to shave the 14 bolt. The first step when we do that is you're gonna wanna get inside this. You're gonna wanna get in there with brake cleaner, a lint-free rag, and clean it out as best as possible. You're also going to want to remove the drain plug in the bottom of the diff. Now, you'll see in a little bit that we are actually going to be cutting through the middle of that drain plug. So you want to remove it. You want to clean the threads really well. You want to clean the bolt or the plug really well and get all the little bits of oil and stuff that would normally be in there out. The reason for that is once we cut this, you're going to have to weld it on the top and on the bottom. And the problem when you weld is you're heating it. So the oil that's left in there, even if it's microscopic, basically, it will boil out and it will contaminate your weld, making it porous, which will make leaks in the future. We want to avoid those. So we're going to remove it. We're going to clean it with brake cleaner. We're going to put it back in nice and tight, and then we're going to start marking it so we know where to cut. All right, guys, now that that drain plug is clean, the threads are clean, the inside of the housing is clean, we're going to talk about the couple different kinds of shaves that you can do. Now, the one we're opting to go with is the 13 bolt diff cover shave. It basically cuts off the bottom bolt off your diff and gives you 1.25 inches more ground clearance than you have compared to a full-size 14 bolt. Now, there is another one. It's a lot more expensive, upwards sometimes of near $1,000 by the time you're done. That gives you 1.5 inches of ground clearance. But in order to do that, you actually cut off the entire bottom of your diff. You have to weld a plate onto the bottom of the diff perfectly because they usually add a couple extra bolts on the sides. And when and if they don't line up with the cover, right? So it's a little more complicated. And guys, that kit takes a lot more time, a lot more welding, a lot more. Sometimes people even bring the housings to machine shops to cut them off just perfectly. And the 13 bolt diff cover gives you 1/4 inch less ground clearance than one of those kits, but they're like $150, right? As opposed to buying one of those kits for $700, $800, $900. So I'd rather save all that money, put it into my locker, put it into my suspension, something else in the rig, and have 1/4 inch less ground clearance. Because guys, in my experience, no matter what you're off-roading, no matter how much ground clearance you have, no matter how little ground clearance you have, you're still gonna drag your diff over rocks. So with being that this rig's gonna have lockers, being that we're doing this on a budget, we're definitely gonna go with the 13 bolt shave cover. So let's get to it. First thing you're gonna wanna do when it comes time to mark where to cut is to put on your new 13 bolt diff cover. This one happens to be made by Motobuilt, but there are a number of companies that also make them. When you put it in, make sure you use just a few bolts to make sure that it's perfectly lined up. And you can see with this diff cover on how much we're actually going to be cutting off the bottom of your casting. Don't worry about the bolt hole just yet. We're going to basically make sure and double check that our drain plug is tight, and then we're going to scribe a line on here. I'm going to remove the cover, check, make sure I have enough mating surface left for the bottom with some RTV. Now, I know what you guys are thinking about problems with leaks and things like that, but you got to remember that the gasket mating flange on this diff cover is so thick and so strong, and then the RTV is so strong that if you've seen my other videos about changing diff fluid, you'll see that I can't, with all the bolts removed, it's hard to knock the cover off. So I've never had a leak. I've done this a number of times. Now, when I cut this, I like to give myself about 1/8 of an inch of diff still sticking out below the cover, okay? That's why I said before, it's 1.25 inches advertised as far as clearance goes, but I like to give myself a little bit of diff hanging below just to protect the cover and ensure that I don't get any leaks. So let's scribe that line, check it out. As you can see here, you have something about the width of my pinky finger, maybe slightly less than that for your gasket mating surface on the bottom here. That will be just fine. We're gonna cut this off. Again, you wanna go slow here. You wanna make sure you're doing it right. You wanna dot your I's and cross your T's because you only get one shot at this. And if your housing does not seal all the way anymore, well, it's still repairable, but now you have to invest in one of those more expensive shave kits, and it's just not necessary if you do this right. We're gonna reattach the diff cover and get to cutting. Just scribe that line, and I'll say that I did exactly what I wanted to do. If you can see here, there's still a tiny bit of gasket surface sticking out below the cover. It's exactly what I wanted. And I'm going to continue to scribe that line deeper and deeper, going slowly to make sure it stays straight. And if I get to a point where the 4.5 inch grinder cutoff wheel is not big enough, I'll switch to a reciprocating saw with a metal blade like you saw me use in other videos, and we'll finish the job. Okay guys, so there you have it, all right? You saw how I cut this. We now have 1.25 inches more ground clearance, maybe slightly less. We also cut this 14th hole here, basically right through the middle. I'm gonna clean that with brake cleaner, get in there with a wire brush, make sure it's free of all contaminants. This is the drain plug. The reason your drain plug no longer looks round is because it goes in on an angle. And that left to finish this up is the welding. Now, this is a cast center section. When you weld the cast steel, the process is a little different. It's not hard, I just haven't shown you how to do it yet. And in order to keep this video short and sweet, I'm gonna show you how to weld the cast in another video when we weld the tubes to the center section. We're gonna have to do that on the 14 bolt. We're also gonna have to do that on the Dana 60. But anytime you weld to cast, whether you're welding a truss, whether you're welding tubes to the center section or your shave kit, you're gonna have to follow this process in order to ensure that you get enough penetration and that your weld is good. Again, I'm not gonna show you that today. So look out for that in a future video. It's on the way. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this one. This is definitely the way that I recommend shaving your diff. Why spend the extra money? Why spend the extra time when you can put it into another place in your build and get almost the same result within 1/4 inch of the same ground clearance? It's silly to me, guys. Just save the cash, pick yourself up a 13 bolt diff cover. There's a number of companies that make them, and there you have it, all right? Make sure you click that subscribe button, like this video, share it, even drop a comment. We got giveaways starting soon, and this build is just getting started.